Ever opened a Christmas present that you really didn't want? Or like you just weren't expecting? You thought like, this isn't, had I had input, I don't think this is what I would have asked for. And you're like, what do I do with my face right now? I remember the first time I experienced it, I was probably 7 years old. And I remember I unwrapped a gift from a family member, and it was a globe. And I think, to be fair for this family member, I think that they were thinking like, it would be the story where later in life I would become Galileo, and I would be like, and this one Christmas, my aunt got me the globe, and that sparked my imagination. But I wasn't that kid, so I was like, well, this isn't the Millennium Falcon. So like, I just remember sitting there and just spinning it and thinking, this isn't what I would have picked. Or how about maybe your first year of marriage or in a relationship that Christmas? There's really a tapestry weaving together of traditions and family, and it all kind of culminates in the giving of the gift. And I remember my wife, it was probably the 20th or 21st. It wasn't Christmas. It wasn't even Christmas Eve. And a box was delivered to our doorstep, a fairly large box. And I signed for it, and my wife said, well, this is your Christmas gift. And she said, open it. And I panicked in that moment, and I didn't totally know what to do. My head told me what my heart knew, which was, you don't open gifts on the 21st. And so I opened this box, and it was this really cool like desk that she had gotten me, but it wasn't Christmas. And I knew in my soul that there would be a level of disappointment on Christmas morning, because this was the big gift. Like every Christmas has the king gift, and that was it, and I had already opened it. That same year, I got my wife a gift. I got her a weekend away. Now, I did all the research. I printed out the tickets. I printed out the reservations. I got the gift cards lined up. I had the place we would get our coffee. I got us on a ferry boat over to Seattle. And I got her a night at it was called a boutique hotel. Boutique. That sounds fancy. And so I got the reservation, and we were on the ferry ride over to this boutique hotel. And she says, tell me about where are we staying? And I was like, that's a great question. You know, I had found it. I think I found it on a Groupon, and I'd gotten it, boutique hotel. And so I pulled up. There's a great site, a website called Yelp. And on this particular website called Yelp, anybody in the general public can go and they can rate experiences, restaurants, hotels. And so I was like, well, I'll just pull up the Yelp and give her, a little bit of information about where we're going. And I had not looked at the Yelp on this boutique experience. And I would say, there's a star rating, and there's kind of everyone has their own threshold for hotels. And I probably am like I'd probably go to a 3-star. I'd be okay with a 3-star, maybe 3 to 5 star. My wife, Kayla's not. Probably 4 to 5 star. A half star would be too low. So I thought, well, maybe boutique was not, maybe they misinterpreted what boutique was, and maybe I will really enjoy it. So I started to scroll through some of the reviews, and the general public had kind of found one phrase they had really latched onto for this particular experience, and it was bed bugs. It wasn't the highlight gift of that year. Ever opened something you just thought, this isn't what I wanted? How do you handle disappointment? Adjustments. Change. I feel like a lot of us are sitting here looking at the gift of 2020, and we've opened it and we thought, this isn't what I would have picked out. Can we declare that 2020 has been the year of adjustments? I mean, even just think about the terminology we've adjusted to, right? Like the word quarantine. In 2019, I could not successfully spell quarantine. And now I can like 50% of the time. Shelter in place. When I first heard that, here's what I thought. I thought shelter in place was a red light, green light situation. And I was like, when the governor declares shelter in place, wherever you are, you live there. I was like, how embarrassing. If you were in a moment of temptation, getting a meat and cheese sandwich from Arby's, and then the governor called shelter in place, you have to live in that Arby's. I was like, how's shelter there? Practice social distancing. Practice social distancing. I had never, not only had I never heard of that, I had for sure never practiced. Lots of practice this year. Or biggest adjustment, the film Mulan. In 2019, I had an image of myself. 1998, Bryan reappearing in a theater full of friends and family, enjoying this cinematic masterpiece. Instead, I was alone in chili-stained pajamas watching it on my television set for $30 by myself. And the worst part of the adjustment, there's no Mushu in the movie. The best character, Eddie Murphy, plays the dragon, Mushu. He's not in the movie. And some of you are saying, I'm going to email you because you just ruined that movie for you. I saved you, is what I did. A horrible adjustment. It would be as if they remade the Star Wars franchise and killed Han Solo at the end. Some of you were like, you just ruined another movie for me. Listen, you had 5 full years to see that movie. So don't send me, you ruined Christmas emails, okay? It's a year of adjustments. There is no way anybody in their place of work is sitting there like, yeah, you know what? This is what we forecasted. We sat there in January, no parents sitting there in their living room, Christmas tree up, looking at all the family photos, glass of Chardonnay in hand, saying, isn't this just totally what we predicted for our family this year? It's unexpected. What do we do with adjustments? What do we do when things don't go our way? What do we do when God doesn't do what we want him to do? We're going to look at a story today in the Gospel of Luke. We've been walking through this entire series on the Gospel of Luke. We're going to look at a story that shows the dichotomy of 2 characters, 2 different personalities, 2 different responses to Jesus, and how the adjustments we're able to make can help draw us closer to God, further away from God. And over the course of this series of Luke, we've looked at a lot of different stories that Luke picks to tell the story of who Jesus is. And in this particular story, we see the gospel writers all tell the story of the death and resurrection of Jesus, but Luke picks an interesting story to tell. And this is in Luke chapter 23, it says this. 2 others, both criminals, were led out to be executed with him, with Jesus. When they came to a place called the Skull, they nailed him to the cross. And the criminals were also crucified, one on his right and one on his left. Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing." And the soldiers gambled for his clothes by throwing dice. The crowd watched, and the leaders scoffed. "He saved others," they said. "Let him save himself if he is really God's Messiah, the chosen one." The soldiers mocked him too by offering him a drink of sour wine. They called out to him, "If you are the King of the Jews, save yourself." A sign was fastened above him with these words, "This is the King of the Jews." One of the criminals hanging beside him scoffed, "So you're the Messiah, are you? Prove it by saving yourself, and us too while you're at it." But the other criminal protested, "Don't you fear God even when you have been sentenced to die? We deserve to die for our crimes, but this man hasn't done anything wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus replied, "I assure you, today you will be with me in paradise." A short Bible study on this passage. By the way, if you're looking for a great way to take notes, download the New Life app. There's a fill in the blank for all of these notes. The first thing we see is this. The title Messiah means saving one. The criminal who mocked Jesus was mocking his ability to save and therefore questioning that he was Israel's Messiah. The next thing I wrote down is Jesus was crucified because the Jewish leaders convinced Rome that he was a dangerous revolutionary. The word paradise comes from the Persian word for garden, and it's the same word used for the Garden of Eden and for heaven. And then the 2 thieves contrast 2 ways people see Jesus. Is he the Messiah or another disappointing would-be revolutionary? three characters in this story. We see multiple characters in this story, but three key characters we see in this story. The first is the first thief. And the first thief, I just call him prove it, because that's his attitude. He's cynical. He seems disappointed, or that there was broken expectations. He also seems frustrated, almost antagonistic towards Jesus. See, it's one of the perspectives we have when it feels like God doesn't do what we want him to do, or it feels like circumstances around us have fallen short, is we can become cynical. The second character is the second thief. And the second thief, I just categorize him as remember me, because those are his words. And I would say he's relational. He seems to be leaning in with Jesus. There's this, as if he's heard Jesus' words of, Father, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing. Kind of this call of Jesus that shows that Jesus' attitude, his ethics, his new way of being human was carried out even to his final moments of forgiveness, reconciliation over any other way. And the second criminal seems to have a response of humility. He says, in your kingdom, remember me. And the third character is Jesus, the Messiah. And we see that he is the Savior. He's the sacrifice. He's also welcoming. He embraces this interaction with this second thief. And so let's take that word Messiah. It's not a word that some of us would typically hear or maybe have any kind of longevity with or holds any weight. The story of Scripture really is encompassed by this word Messiah. We go all the way back to the first book of the Bible, Genesis, and we see that there's this interaction with humanity where there is a serpent that tempts Adam and Eve. And the serpent, we don't get a lot of information, like where did it come from, what is it? We don't get that, but we know that there is real evil and that humanity chooses selfishness or their own choice over God's will. And because of that, there's this broken relationship. And in this very first story in Genesis, there's this promise that God makes that he will send somebody who will strike down the serpent, evil, injustice. And that there will be kind of this mutual sacrifice as the serpent struck down, his heels bitten. And then over the course of the story, we see that there's this waiting, this anticipation for this king that would arise and put down evil for good, and that the garden imagery would be restored, and that goodness would be restored. And they're waiting and anticipating. There's even a moment with David where they think this might be the Messiah, but we see that the serpent has wrapped itself around creation and around the human heart, and David is just as human as anybody else. And then Israel seems to have this series of kings who are just like, choose evil or injustice over God's way. And because of that, another nation takes them over. And there's no kind of even lineage of king to come and to save them and to rescue them. And so they're just waiting for somebody to come in and to stop this horrible evil around them. And that's the Messiah that was promised. What do you do when your expectation doesn't seem to be what God bargained? And what do you do when it feels like you're looking around and you're saying, God, you didn't do what I wanted you to do? So my big question for today is, what do you do when God doesn't do what you want? I just even think about those commercials you see on TV for like medicine. like it always says at the end of it, it'll be like, talk to your doctor about Mylanta. And I'm like, does anybody do that? Like, I've never gone into my physician and been like, hey, doc, why don't you sit on the crinkly paper? I'll take the swirly chair. And I saw this commercial, doc. You've probably seen it, where the commercial started in black and white, which I really related to, and then it turned to color, and the guy in it, I really related to him. And he was with his granddaughter, and they were picking sunflowers, and then there was this, there was a whole thing with they got ice cream in a parlor, and I just thought, that is a medication I should probably be on. Nobody does that. Whatever my doctor tells me to do is what I do. I don't tell my doctor what to do. He went to school longer than I did. So why do I do it with Jesus? Jesus says that He came to rescue those who know they need a doctor. He didn't come for the righteous, he came for the sinners. And somehow I continue to tell Jesus what to do. What expectations do you have for the Messiah? Today I want to look at the two personalities of these thieves. And the first we see is like this whole personality of cynicism, this response of cynicism. And the second really is this, we see adaptability. The second thief, how much he knew of Jesus, I don't know, but we do see him say, remember me. If you feel like God's forgotten you in this season, in this gift that you open, you're like, I wouldn't have never asked for this. God hasn't forgotten you. In the early 70s, they did this study, and there's this company, this is an Illinois phone company, and they were growing, tremendous growth, and they were growing so quickly, they had all this change. And they brought in this university to study the intricacies of their business because something was happening. There was two types of leaders. The first group, they were actually having success in all of the change. They were able to adapt and able to overcome some of the struggles, and they were actually doing really well. The second group was really struggling. The challenges just like, it seemed like were burying them. And they were interested in these two different personality types. And they found this, that the first group that they called adaptive leaders saw change, warranted or unwarranted, as an opportunity to personally grow. The second group, those who struggled, they saw change as something to avoid and continued to reflect and point back to what they called the good old days. How often do I end up like this first thief? Stuck in what I thought God was going to do back there in the good old days. The ability to adapt. We see it all throughout Scripture. All the heroes of our faith had the ability to look at the challenges ahead of them, the spirit God had given them, and said, I'm willing to adapt. 3 things I wrote down today for just how to adapt. How do we do this? The first I wrote down is we serve over survive. As followers of Jesus, an ancient way, an ancient practice, we are not called to survive. We are called to serve. Why did the church explode? The early first century church explode is because followers of Jesus were willing to serve in ridiculous ways that had never been seen before. The Black Plague, like where were the followers of Jesus going into the cities when everybody else was going out? They weren't saying, how do I survive? They were saying, how can I serve? I'm worried as I watch myself and others in this season that I can grow apathetic to what God has in front of me. And instead of serving, I'm just trying to survive. Our existence is beyond the here and now. And we have an opportunity to serve. The second thing I wrote down is faith over fear. I actually believe this, that we fight for faith over fear in our life. We go to war with fear. And it's easy to get stuck in the fear trap. Like, it's almost so easy I become blind to it around me. My wife and I right now in this season, we're seeing this great spiritual mentor, marriage counselor, not because internally on our own marriage, but because of external things that are happening. It was just like, we had a point where we're like, we actually just need somebody else to talk through how to do this. And she said something really interesting. She said, the stuff you guys are walking through, honestly, right now, like it would be a lot without 2020 and a pandemic. And she said, I'm going to give you some really important homework, maybe the most important spiritual step you could take in this season. And I leaned in because she said, you're going to do this for the next 6 weeks. And I'm not like, you're not going to get a pass. And I was like, I was ready. I imagined, I was like, okay, this is, I thought we might be lighting some candles. I don't know, maybe reading something that felt like really spiritual. She said, every Friday night, I need you to watch a comedy together. She said, you two need to laugh. And it wasn't a way that I was disregarding sorrow. She was like, you're not bearing this. You are fully feeling it. Now it's time to laugh. I said to a friend this week, as I was preparing for this message, I just feel like God is saying to followers of Jesus and maybe our culture, it's okay to laugh. Like for my wife and I, it was like, okay, we can either cry or we can laugh. And we're like, let's laugh. You ever heard the phrase, laughter is the best medicine? Where'd it come from? So the Bible. So Proverbs 17, a cheerful heart is good medicine. How do we combat against fear? I believe laughter is going to help us adapt. The third thing I wrote down is this. It's fighting for a future over the past. As followers of Jesus, following the ancient way of Jesus, we have the opportunity in this season to craft and create a new future. I believe that there are business-minded men and women who will rise up in this season to start new businesses to give good away, to invent new ways of doing things. I believe that a business that will give $1 million to the church will come out of this season because followers of Jesus are saying, we're not going to lay dormant. The Spirit of God is inside of us. We're going to create something new for the future. I believe there are artists and poets and musicians and fashion designers and web developers who are going to think of new inventive ways to get the gospel even further. I believe that there are dads and moms who are going to raise up their family in the way of Christ in a way that feels unorthodox in the season. So we will have leaders in the next wave of the church for the next season because we are not stuck in the past, but we are moving towards the future. We are looking at this moment, today. What does Jesus say to the thief? He says, today you'll be with me in paradise, pointing to the future, and we're saying, we're going to go after it. Christmas, Advent, is a looking, a waiting, a yearning for what Christ is going to do in all of creation. And we're saying, today, we're going to fight for the future. My daughter, we took her to the zoo last week, and it's so cool. Right now, you can get a time slot at the zoo, and it was just us there. It's like a beautiful day. We got coffee. Like, you ever seen the movie You Bought a Zoo? It was like we bought a zoo. We had it all to ourselves. And we got there, and she's at just the fun age where it's like she kind of gets it. And the first exhibit we walked to were the elephants. And there's this massive elephant playing kind of with this big metal drum. And she's learning this, like, doing the animal sounds. And she looks out at the elephant, and she just goes, we're like, that's right, Kennedy, that's an elephant. And we have the zoo to ourselves. So, like, we just posted up there watching the elephant. And then we went to the next exhibit. And it was the tigers. And this is what she did.
Look at the elephant.
See that? What'd she do? Then we went to the penguins. You know what she did? There's a picture. At every exhibit after the elephants was contexted by her experience with the elephants. It was like everything after that was elephants. We obviously had to go back and see the elephants because she was obsessed with the elephants. Look at interactions with Jesus, especially here with this second thief and all throughout Luke. They seem to have interactions with Jesus, who is such a real, full, life-giving person, that everything else after is Jesus. Every experience after is Jesus. And if you're watching this or you're listening maybe today and you're curious, maybe you're skeptical, maybe you're cynical, maybe you're not, you would say, I'm not currently following Jesus. I'm not even sure I'm not a person of faith. I think I believe in something. I haven't connected yet. Jesus is so authentic, so real, and so present in what you're experiencing right now, in the adjustments and the chaos, that he will change everything. During this Christmas season, maybe you would just have an opportunity for the next few weeks where you would give us a couple of moments each day where you just say, okay, Jesus, if you're there, I want to know you. I started doing ministry in inner city work, and there was this great older pastor. He was so faithful. He'd show up every week and sit down in this larger group of really eager young men looking how to follow Christ. And I remember one time he would always say, anytime you're at a party getting drunk or high, I want you to ask God, what do you have for my life? I'm a young youth pastor. I'm like, this isn't in my youth pastor manual. What does God have for my life? Maybe you're a follower of Jesus for a long time, and you're sensing that there's something coming. There's new. God is pouring out his Spirit in a new way. You're starting to sense this kind of rumbling or restlessness, but you're looking back and you're saying, what do I do when God didn't show up the way I wanted? Adapt. We adapt. It's what the church does. It's what followers of Jesus do. Will you pray with me today? Jesus, all over the world, here in our spaces, we humbly look at Advent and the Christmas story and say, it's unexpected. A total adjustment. But it's what you were doing all along, God. It wasn't an adjustment for you. It wasn't your plan B. You weren't surprised. Just as the same way you're not surprised by this year, you're not surprised by the adjustments in our life. You are with us, Emmanuel. You are moving into the neighborhood and you are becoming real. And we thank you for the hope and your consistent spirit over this season. I pray for every heart out there that doesn't know you, that stumbled upon this message or stumbled upon this gathering, has stepped into the doors of a New Life gathering and thought, I'm curious. God, will you strike something in our heart so that we can say, I want to follow you all the days of my life. For those of us, God, we're just praying the prayer, remember me. May we know that we're not forgotten, God. For those of us, we just need to laugh. Will you return our joy to us? For those of us, maybe we've even been burying some sorrow. Will you give us a space to express that? A safe, that you are the great comforter. We need you, Jesus. Guide us, move us into the future so we can be the people that you've called us to be. Pray this in your name. Amen.